Today, we're diving into a story that completely reshaped a continent, an epic of migration, conflict, and creation. And here's the kicker. For thousands of years, this entire story was hidden, locked away in the one place nobody knew how to look.
Our own DNA. So I want you to forget what you think you know about ancient history. The real story, the one that modern science has uncovered, is so much more dramatic and complex than we ever imagined. So let's start this genetic journey. Let's find out who we really are.
All right, before we can get to the great upheaval, you have to understand the world that it replaced. Our story kicks off about 6,000 years ago, in a place that archaeologists call Old Europe.
Now, when I say 6,000 years ago, I want you to just completely erase that picture in your head of, primitive cave dwellers. The world we're stepping into wasn't one of struggle. It was one of real sophistication, built by the continent's very first farmers. And they created something remarkably stable and, in a lot of ways, just jaw-droppingly advanced.
These weren't just some scattered villages. Not at all. These people, descendants of farmers who'd come from Anatolia, built the first ever mega-settlements on Earth. Some of them were bigger than any city in Mesopotamia or Egypt at the time. Think about that. They were master artists making this stunning pottery, and it looks like their societies may have even been centered around female figures or goddesses. This was a complex, thriving world, and it was right on the verge of a seismic change.
And that change was about to come thundering in from the east. And listen, this wasn't some small shift. This was a force of nature that would completely tear up and redraw the genetic and cultural map of Europe from scratch.
So, let's meet the agents of that change. They emerged from these vast, grassy plains between the Black and Caspian Seas. History knows them as the Yamnaya, and they were about to just explode onto the world stage.
So what was their secret? What made them so revolutionary? It wasn't just one thing, it was this whole technological package that nobody else on Earth had. They mastered the horse, they invented the wheeled cart, and they had bronze weapons. Put that all together, you get a new kind of mobility, a new kind of power that the settled farmers of old Europe were completely unprepared for. It was a game changer.
Okay, but this is where the story takes a huge, and I mean huge, plot twist. See, for the longest time, we just assumed this was one single, massive wave of people moving west. But genetics? Genetics tells a much more interesting story.
Now, to get this twist, we need to understand our main detective tool here, genetic markers. The best way to think about a marker is like a permanent family name, But it's written right into your DNA. And because it's passed down from father to son, almost unchanged, we can use these surnames to track ancient family lines across thousands of years and thousands of miles.
So what the genetics showed us, wow. It wasn't one big wave. It was more like two enormous rivers, both flowing from the same source. You had a western branch, the classic Yamnaya, who carried that genetic marker R1b. They swept into Western Europe and became what we call the Bill-Beaker culture. But at the same time, their cousins, a northern branch called the corded ware culture, pushed into northern and central Europe. And they carried a related marker R1a. Two different groups, two different routes, but they shared this common origin. And together, they were about to remake an entire continent.
So you've got these two powerful, super mobile groups hitting old Europe. What happens next? Well, it's not a simple story of replacement. It's a full-on collision of worlds.
The historian Francisco Villar put it perfectly. He called it a process of intense hybridization. This wasn't just conquest. Yeah, in some places it was absolutely brutal replacement, but in a lot of other places it was this messy, complex mix of everything, of interaction, of cultures blending, and yes, of domination that ended up forging completely new peoples out of the old and the new.
And this incredible mixing, this wasn't the end of the story. No way. It was actually the beginning. This is the moment where we start to see the real origins of many of the peoples we recognize from the history books.
So check this out. That western branch, the R1b one, that lineage gives rise to these great Bronze and Iron Age cultures, Urnfield and Hallstatt, who we now see as essentially the ancestors of the Celts. Meanwhile, that northern, R1a branch, after mixing with the local populations, their descendants became the ancestors of the Germanic and the Balto-Slavic peoples. The takeaway is just undeniable. These ancient migrations directly created the great cultural families of Europe.
And if you think that's big, get this. The expansion didn't just stop in Europe. Other groups from the steppe pushed east, carrying their genes and their language all the way into Asia, where they became the ancestors of the Indo-Iranian peoples. This is why. This is the ancient connection that makes languages as far apart as Spanish and Hindi part of the same giant family tree. It's staggering.
Okay, so after all of that, all this movement, this mixing, this migration, the genetic big picture of modern Europe actually becomes surprisingly simple. Your deep ancestry really comes down to three main ancient pillars.
Pillar number 1 is the legacy of Europe's original hunter-gatherers. Pillar 2 is the massive contribution from those first Anatolian farmers who built old Europe. And pillar number 3, the real game changer, is the arrival of the steppe pastoralists. Hunter-gatherer, farmer, and steppe rider. These three ancient threads are woven together to create the complex, beautiful tapestry of modern European DNA.
You know, the thing that just blows my mind is that for thousands and thousands of years, this entire epic story was just gone, lost to time. It only existed as this silent, unreadable story inside of us. And then, almost overnight, modern genetics handed us the key. We could finally read the history that was written in ourselves all along.
And that really just leaves you with this one awe-inspiring question, doesn't it? If we could uncover a story this massive, a story that explains the very origins of cultures and languages across a continent, what else is out there? What other epic stories about who we are and where we came from are just sitting there, waiting to be found, locked away in the silent code of our DNA?